I paid my son and his wife $700 every single week for 3 years so they could stay afloat. And on the one day that truly mattered to me, my 75th birthday, they didn't even show up. When I called to ask why, my daughter-in-law laughed over the music at some party and said, "Your age means nothing to us." And that was the moment I decided to find out what our relationship looked like when the money stopped coming. It was exactly 7:14 p.m. on October 14th when I realized that the silence in the private dining room of Le Montgomery, a restaurant where the prix fixe menu costs $185 per person, was not going to be broken by the arrival of my family. I sat at the head of a table set for 5, the white linen tablecloth crisp and blinding under the crystal chandelier, watching the ice melt in my water glass. I had arrived at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes early, to ensure everything was perfect for my 75th birthday. I had ordered the vintage 2012 Dom Perignon, asking the sommelier to keep it chilled until my son, Mark, and his wife, Jessica, arrived with my 2 grandchildren. I had checked my phone 3 times, no texts, no calls, just the silent mocking display of the time ticking forward. 7:15, 7:16, 7:17. At 7:30 p.m., the maitre d', a man named Henri, who had known my late husband and me for 20 years, approached the table with a look of professional pity that stung worse than the abandonment itself. He asked if I would like to order an appetizer while I waited. I declined, my throat tight, and decided to make the call I had been dreading. I dialed Mark's number first. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed Jessica's number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. The background noise was deafening, a chaotic thumping of heavy bass and the shrill shriek of a crowd. It sounded like a nightclub or a very loud house party. "Jessica?" I asked, pressing the phone to my ear to hear over the din. "Is everything all right? We had a reservation for 7. Jessica's voice came through, distorted and slurred, the unmistakable cadence of someone who had started drinking hours ago. "Oh my God, Evelyn, is that you? I can't hear you. It's literally so loud in here." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. "Jessica, it's my birthday dinner. We are at Le Montgomery. Where are you?" There was a pause, followed by a laugh, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut through the noise. "Oh, right, that. Look, Evelyn, we totally forgot. Mark's friend is having this huge bash in the city, like VIP tables and everything. We just got caught up. You know how it is." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. "You forgot?" I confirmed, my voice trembling not with sadness, but with a sudden, dawning clarity. "Jessica, I confirmed this with you yesterday. I have been sitting here for 45 minutes. Jessica sighed, an exasperated sound that implied I was the one being unreasonable. "Okay, well, don't be dramatic. It's just a dinner. We're busy. We're young. We can't just drop everything because the calendar says you turned another year older. Your age means nothing to us, Evelyn. It's just a number. Honestly. Go home, have some tea, and we'll swing by next week or something. Bye." The line went dead. I sat there for a full minute, holding the phone, listening to the silence of the empty restaurant that suddenly felt very large and very cold. "Your age means nothing to us." The phrase echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my memory. It collided with other memories, specifically the memory of the standing order I had set up 3 years ago. Every Friday morning at 3 a.m., my bank account automatically transferred $700 to Mark's joint checking account. That was $3,033 a month, $36,400 a year. Over the last 3 years, I had transferred exactly $109,200 to them. I called it support. They called it staying afloat. They claimed the cost of living was too high, that the mortgage on the 4-bedroom colonial I had helped them with, giving them a $60,000 down payment, was suffocating them. They claimed the private school tuition for the kids was essential. I had believed them. Or rather, I had chosen to believe them because I wanted to be the benevolent matriarch, the safety net that allowed my son to live a life of comfort. But as I sat there, humiliated in my pearls and silk blouse, staring at the empty chairs, the math began to rearrange itself in my head. I was a retired forensic accountant. I had spent 40 years auditing corporations for fraud, finding the missing pennies in ledgers worth billions. Why had I never audited my own son? I signaled Henri. "I would like the check, please," I said, my voice steady. "And cancel the food, but bring the champagne. I want to take it home." I left the restaurant at 7:55 p.m. I drove my 2021 Lexus ES back to my quiet, paid-off condominium in the hills. I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed in the restaurant. Now was the time for accounting. I walked into my home office, a room lined with mahogany bookshelves and the smell of old paper, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank portal. I pulled up the transaction history for the last 3 years. I exported the data to a spreadsheet. Then I logged into social media. I didn't have an account of my own. I found the platforms vapid, but I had a burner account I used to keep an eye on market trends and news. I navigated to Jessica's Instagram page. It was public. I began to scroll. While they were struggling to stay afloat, Jessica had posted photos of a new Louis Vuitton Neverfull tote bag, retail price $2,030, 3 weeks ago. There were photos of a weekend trip to Napa Valley in August, estimated cost $4,000. There were photos of Mark showing off a new Tag Heuer watch retail price $3,200. The timestamps on these posts correlated almost perfectly with the weeks they had called me, crying about unexpected bills or car repairs, asking if I could float them an extra $1,000 $20,000 just this once. I had been their ATM, their fool, their silent partner in a lifestyle they couldn't afford. They didn't respect me. They consumed me. Your age means nothing to us. No, my age meant nothing. My money meant everything. I looked at the clock. It was 9:15 p.m. on Thursday. The automatic transfer was scheduled to execute in 5 hours and 45 minutes. $700. It wasn't a fortune to me. I had invested wisely, and my portfolio was robust, but it was the principle. It was the contract. A contract they had violated with a cruelty that was breathtaking in its casualness. I moved my mouse to the Transfers and Payments tab. I clicked on Scheduled Transfers. I saw it there. Asterisk weekly support, Mark and Jess, $700. Asterisk I hovered over the edit button, but then I moved to delete. A pop-up window appeared. Asterisk, are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? Asterisk, I didn't hesitate. I clicked times. Yes. Asterisk. The screen refreshed. The list was empty. The Bank of Mom was officially closed. But I wasn't done. I wanted to see the panic. I wanted to see the reality check hit them like a freight train. I knew their financial cycle. Mark was paid on the 1st and the 15th. Today was the 14th. Their mortgage payment, which was $3,400, was set to autopay on the 15th tomorrow. They relied on my $700 hitting their account on Friday morning to buffer the account before the mortgage was withdrawn. Without my deposit, and considering the VIP table they were currently paying for, their balance would likely be critically low. I closed the laptop. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of the Dom Perignon. I sat in my living room, in the dark, sipping the cold, expensive wine, and waited for the sun to rise. I slept surprisingly well. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to the sound of birds and the peaceful silence of a house that owed nothing to anyone. I made coffee. I read the Wall Street Journal. At 8:05 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mark. I let it ring. It stopped, then rang again immediately. I picked it up on the third attempt, pitching my voice to sound groggy and frail, the very caricature of the old woman they thought I was. Hello? I rasped. Mom? Mom, are you there? Mark's voice was high-pitched, tight with panic. There was no apology for the birthday. No, how are you? Just immediate, frantic need. Mark, is everything okay? I asked, feigning confusion. No, nothing is okay. I'm at the gas station and my card just got declined. I checked the app and the transfer didn't come through. The 700. It's Friday, Mom. It always comes on Friday. Did you change something? I took a slow sip of coffee. Change something? I repeated slowly. Mark, I'm 75. You know how I get with technology. I don't even know how to change the settings on the microwave. Maybe it's a bank error? You know how these computers are. A bank error? Mark snapped. Mom, the mortgage pulls today at noon. If that money isn't in there, we're going to overdraft. We have like $40 in the checking account. Jessica is freaking out. You need to call the bank right now. Call them and tell them to wire it immediately. The entitlement in his voice was so pure, so unadulterated, that it was almost impressive. He didn't ask, he commanded. He viewed my money as his salary, his right. $40. A man of 38 with a wife and 2 children, living in a house worth $800,000, had $40 to his name because he had spent the rest on appearances. I can't call the bank right now, Mark, I said gently. I'm not feeling well. I think I might have come down with something last night. The stress of waiting. What do you mean waiting? He had already forgotten. He had forgotten that 12 hours ago he had left me sitting in a restaurant alone. For dinner, Mark, my birthday dinner. Oh God, Mom, are you serious? You're doing this because of dinner? That is so petty. Look, we're sorry, okay? Happy birthday. There, can you send the money now? Zelle it? Just Zelle it to me. I can't, I said. I don't know how to use Zelle, and I'm going back to bed. I think I need to rest. My age, you know. It means nothing to you, but it feels very heavy to me today. I hung up. I turned the phone off. I went to my calendar and marked the date. This was day 1. The discovery phase had begun. They thought this was a glitch. They thought I was just a confused old lady having a tantrum. They had no idea that I was about to audit their entire existence. I spent the rest of the day gathering my own files. I pulled the deed to their house, which, thankfully, I had insisted on keeping a copy of since I provided the down payment. I looked at the terms of the private loan I had given them for the down payment. It was a formal loan, drafted by my lawyer, distinct from the weekly gifts. It had a clause, asterisk, callable, upon 30 days' notice. Asterisk, I had never intended to call it. It was meant to be forgiven upon my death, but I wasn't dead yet, and they had made it very clear that my life was an inconvenience to them. I needed to know exactly how deep their hole was. If they had $40 in the bank and a $3,000 mortgage payment due and a VIP lifestyle to maintain, they were likely living on credit. I called my friend Susan, who worked at the credit bureau. I didn't ask her to do anything illegal, of course. I just asked her for advice on how to run a background check on a potential tenant for one of my rental properties. She gave me the name of a service. I paid the $50. I ran Mark's name. The report that came back was a kaleidoscope of red flags. His credit utilization was at 92%. He had 5 credit cards, all near their limit. He had a personal loan for $25,000 taken out 6 months ago. They were drowning, and I had been the only thing keeping their heads above water. I looked at the report and felt a strange sense of vindication mixed with sorrow. They weren't just mean, they were stupid, and stupid people who are cut off from their supply tend to make desperate mistakes. I turned my phone back on at 6 p.m. I had 14 missed calls from Mark, 6 from Jessica, and 3 text messages. The texts ranged from pleading asterisk, Mom, please. The bank charged us a $35 $200 overdraft fee. Asterisk. Too aggressive. Asterisk. You can't just cut us off. We have kids. Asterisk. Too manipulative. Asterisk. I guess you don't care if your grandkids eat. Asterisk. I didn't reply. I went to the kitchen and made myself a simple dinner of grilled salmon and asparagus. I ate it in silence, enjoying the peace. I was done being the victim. I was the auditor now, and the audit was just beginning. The weekend passed in silence on my end, though my phone continued to buzz with their increasing desperation. By Monday morning, I knew the next phase had to begin. I needed to see them. I needed to look them in the eye and see if there was any remorse or just panic. I drove to their house at 10 a.m. Mark should have been at work. He was a mid-level manager at a logistics firm, but his car, a leased BMW X5, was in the driveway. Jessica's Land Rover was there too. I walked up the path, noting the unkempt lawn and the pile of Amazon boxes on the porch. I rang the bell. Jessica answered. She looked tired, her makeup smeared, wearing a silk robe that I knew cost $300. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed. Oh, you. She didn't invite me in. She stood in the doorway, blocking my path. Did you bring the check? She asked. No, hello. No apology. Just the demand. I didn't bring a check, Jessica, I said, standing on the porch, clutching my handbag. I came to see if you were okay. Mark said you were having financial trouble. Financial trouble? She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Evelyn, we are broke because of you. You pulled the rug out. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to run this house? To keep the kids in street? Jude's? We built our budget around your contribution. You can't just stop. It's breach of contract or something. Breach of contract? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Jessica, it was a gift. A gift is not a contract. And frankly, after Friday, well, I assumed since my age meant nothing, my money meant nothing either. Mark appeared behind her. He looked disheveled, wearing sweatpants. Mom, stop playing games, he said, pushing past Jessica. We're in a hole. The mortgage bounced. The bank is calling. I need $5 grand right now to cover the overdrafts and the payment. I'll pay you back when my bonus comes in December. He had promised to pay me back from his bonus for the last 4 years. I had never seen a dime. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, and saw a stranger who viewed me as a resource to be mined. I don't have $5,000 on me, Mark, I lied, and I'm not writing any more checks. I think it's time you learned to stay afloat on your own. Mark's face turned red. You're kidding, right? You're punishing us for missing one dinner? It's not about the dinner, Mark, I said quietly. It's about the entitlement. It's about the fact that you spent thousands of dollars on a party while living on my handouts. It's about the fact that you have zero respect for the hand that feeds you. So, the hand is closing. Mark stepped onto the porch, towering over me. He used his height to intimidate, a tactic he had learned from his father, my ex-husband. Listen to me, Mom. You are going to fix this. If you don't, you're not seeing the kids. You're not seeing us. You'll be alone. Totally alone. Is that what you want? Die alone in that condo? The threat hung in the air, heavy and ugly. He was weaponizing my grandchildren. He was weaponizing my loneliness. He thought it was his trump card. He didn't know I had already folded that hand. I looked him dead in the eye. I am already alone, Mark, I said, my voice cold as ice. I was alone on my birthday while you were drinking vodka with strangers. I was alone when I paid your down payment. I was alone when I paid for your car. I have been alone for a long time. You just never noticed because the checks kept you company. I turned around and began to walk back to my car. I'm not fixing this, Mark. You are. And Mark, I'm calling the loan. The $60,000. You have 30 days. I got into my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw Mark running down the driveway, shouting, but I couldn't hear him through the glass. I put the car in drive and pulled away. I wasn't going home. I was going to my lawyer's office. I needed to update my will, and I needed to prepare for the eviction process, because I knew, with the certainty of a forensic auditor looking at a bankrupt ledger, that they wouldn't be able to pay. The crash was coming, and I intended to have a front row seat. Harrison's office smelled of lemon polish and old money. He was a man of few words and high billable hours, $450 an hour to be precise, and he had been handling my estate since my husband passed away in 2012. I sat across from him at his glass desk at 11:15 a.m. on that Monday, my hands folded calmly in my lap while Mark's frantic threats echoed in my memory. I placed the original promissory note on the desk. It was a single sheet of paper, signed 4 years ago by both Mark and Jessica in blue ink. It acknowledged a loan of $60,000 for the down payment on the property at 42 Oak Creek Lane, repayable upon demand with 30 days written notice. Harrison picked it up, adjusted his spectacles, and read it in silence. He didn't look surprised. He knew my son. He knew the history. So, we are calling it in? He asked, looking over the rim of his glasses. I nodded once. We are calling it in, Harrison, and I want to update my will. Harrison pulled a legal pad toward him. The current draft leaves the bulk of the estate, approximately $2.4 million in liquid assets and the condo, to Mark, with a stipend for the grandchildren's education. I want to revoke that, I said clearly. I want to establish a generation-skipping trust. The entire estate goes to Leo and Sophie to be held in trust until they reach the age of 25. Mark and Jessica are to have no access to the principal or the interest, not a penny, Harrison scribbled furiously. And who will be the trustee? I will appoint a professional fiduciary, I said. I don't want family involved. Money turns family into sharks. Harrison nodded. Consider it done. I'll draft the demand letter for the $60,000 today. We'll send it via certified mail, return receipt requested. They will have until November 15th to pay in full. If they default, I looked out the window at the city skyline. If they default, we We initiate foreclosure proceedings on the lien. We take the house. Harrison paused. Evelyn, you know this will destroy them. They can't refinance with their credit scores, and they certainly don't have the cash. They will lose the home. I turned back to him. They lost the home the moment they decided that my existence was a burden to be tolerated rather than a life to be respected. Send the letter. The next 3 weeks were a study in the escalation of panic. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't open my door. I became a ghost. But being a ghost doesn't mean you stop watching. It just means you stop being seen. I spent my days conducting the forensic audit I should have done years ago. I pulled the public tax records for their house. They were delinquent on their property taxes by 2 years. That was another $5,000 they owed the county. I looked deeper into Jessica's social media, which she had foolishly left public despite our confrontation. I cross-referenced her VIP nights with Mark's pay cycle. I discovered a pattern. Every time I sent the $700, within 24 hours, Jessica would post a photo of a new purchase or a night out. The caption would usually be something inane, like number self-care or number deserve it. They weren't using my money for the mortgage. They were using my money for the extras and using Mark's salary to barely scrape by on the essentials. They were living a subsidized fantasy. Then, on October 25th, 10 days after the demand letter was delivered, the manipulation shifted tactics. They stopped threatening and started performing. Jessica showed up at the lobby of my condominium building with Leo and Sophie. I watched on the security feed from my iPad. She had dressed them in threadbare clothes I knew were not their usual school attire, and was making them hold a sign that said, "We miss you, Gamma." She was crying, looking up at the camera in the vestibule. It was theater. It was grotesque. The doorman, a sturdy man named Elias, who I tipped generously at Christmas, called up, "Mrs. Vance, your family is here. They are causing a bit of a scene." I looked at the screen. Leo, who was 8, looked embarrassed. Sophie, who was 5, just looked confused. They were being used as human shields in a war over a down payment. "Tell them I am not home, Elias," I said softly, "and tell Mrs. Vance that if she does not remove the children from the premises, I will call Child Protective Services and report her for exploiting minors for financial coercion." I hung up. I watched the screen. Elias walked out. He spoke to Jessica, her face contorted in rage. She threw the sign in the trash can and dragged the children away by their arms, roughly. That was the moment any lingering guilt I had evaporated. She didn't care about those children seeing their grandmother. She cared about the ATM reopening. On November 1st, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, thinking it might be Harrison. It wasn't. It was Mark's boss, a man named Mr. Henderson. "Mrs. Vance?" he asked, sounding uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to bother you. Mark listed you as an emergency contact. Is he okay?" I paused. "Why wouldn't he be okay, Mr. Henderson?" "Well, he hasn't been to work in 3 days. And, well, there's a matter of the company credit card. We've flagged some irregularities. Personal expenses. We're conducting an internal review, but we can't reach him." I felt the cold, familiar sensation of facts slotting into place. The company card. That was how they paid for the VIP table. They had maxed out their own cards, spent my transfer, and Mark had dipped into the corporate funds, thinking he could pay it back before anyone noticed. But then I cut him off, and the house of cards collapsed. "He's alive, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice professional and detached, "but I cannot speak to his whereabouts. And regarding the credit card, I suggest you speak to the police. I am not responsible for my son's debts." I hung up. Mark wasn't just broke. He was now potentially facing criminal embezzlement charges. He had destroyed his career for a bottle of vodka and a booth at a club. The deadline of November 15th arrived with the inevitability of a glacier. At 5 p.m., Harrison called. "Did they pay?" I asked, sipping my tea. "No," he said, "not a dime. Mark called my office this morning, screaming. He said you're a monster. He said he's going to sue you for emotional distress." I chuckled dryly. "Let him sue. He can't afford the filing fee. Proceed with the foreclosure. Harrison, file the notice of default with the county clerk tomorrow morning. I want them out." The process was surprisingly fast because, as I suspected, they had ignored all the legal warnings. They thought I was bluffing. They thought Mom would cave at the last second. They didn't understand that Mom had died in that restaurant on her 75th birthday. The woman who remained was a creditor. 3 days after the filing, I decided to go to the house one last time. I wanted to see the reality before the bank or the sheriff took over. I drove over at dusk. The house was dark. The BMW was gone, repossessed, I assumed. The Land Rover was there, but it had a flat tire. I walked up the path. There were eviction notices taped to the door from the bank, holding the primary mortgage, apparently. They hadn't paid the main mortgage in 4 months. My $60,000 was just the tip of the iceberg. I was about to turn back when the door opened. Mark stood there. He looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in a week. His eyes were bloodshot. He smelled of stale alcohol. When he saw me, he didn't scream. He just slumped against the doorframe. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it. You burned it all down." I stood at the bottom of the steps, wrapped in my wool coat. "I didn't burn anything, Mark," I said. "I just stopped paying for the fuel." "You held the match." He laughed, a broken, wheezing sound. "We have nowhere to go, Mom. Jessica left. She took the kids and went to her sister's in Ohio. She said she's not staying with a loser who's going to jail. I'm alone." I felt a twinge of pain for the grandchildren, but I pushed it down. I had set up the trust. They would be taken care of eventually. But Mark had to learn. "You're not alone, Mark," I said, echoing the words he had thrown at me weeks ago. "You have your consequences. They'll keep you company." I turned to walk away. "Wait," he cried out, his voice cracking. "Mom, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. About the birthday. About the money. About everything. Just help me, please. I have court on Monday for the company card. I need a lawyer. I stopped. I looked back at him. The man who had told me my age meant nothing was now begging that same aged woman to save him. I thought about the $700 a week. I thought about the VIP party. I thought about Jessica laughing. I looked at my son and realized that saving him now would just be enabling him again. It would rob him of the only lesson that might actually change him. I can't help you, Mark, I said. I have to save my money. I hear assisted living is very expensive, and since I have no family to take care of me, I need every penny. I got into my car and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I drove straight to Le Montgomery. I walked in without a reservation. Henri saw me and smiled warmly. Madame Vance, he said, welcome back. I sat at the same table, alone. I ordered the tasting menu. I ordered the Dom Perignon, and this time, I drank a toast to myself. I was 75 years old. My net worth was intact. My dignity was restored, and the silence at the table wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety, a scent I had become intimately familiar with during my 40 years as a forensic accountant. But this time, I wasn't there to testify about cooked books or hidden offshore accounts. I was there to watch my son be sentenced. It was 3 months after the foreclosure, on a sleeting Tuesday in February. Mark stood before the judge, wearing a suit that was clearly borrowed. The sleeves were too long, swallowing his hands. He had pleaded guilty to embezzlement. The amount was $24,000 charged to the corporate card for client entertainment. That was actually bottle service and designer clothes. His lawyer, a overworked public defender named Mr. Garris, had argued for leniency, citing familial stress and a sudden change in financial circumstances. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, wasn't moved. She sentenced him to 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 3 years of probation, and ordered full restitution. I sat in the back row, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't weep. I didn't gasp. I simply witnessed the inevitable result of a life lived without arithmetic. When the bailiff moved to handcuff him, Mark turned to look at the gallery. He saw me. His eyes were hollow, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him for so long. He mouthed the word, Mom, but no sound came out. I nodded, a single, slow acknowledgement of his existence, and then I stood up and walked out before they led him away. I had a flight to catch. I was going to Kyoto for the cherry blossom season. It was a trip I had wanted to take for 20 years, but I had always put it off because Mark needed a new roof, or the grandkids needed braces, or Jessica needed a mental health break in Cabo. Now, the only person who needed anything from me was me. The next 5 years passed with a quiet, rhythmic beauty. I sold the condo in the hills. It felt too large, too full of memories of the before, and moved into a serviced apartment in the city center, overlooking the park. It was sleek, modern, and efficiently luxurious. I spent my days reading biographies, attending the symphony, and managing my portfolio, which grew robustly without the weekly hemorrhage of $700. I didn't hear from Jessica directly. She knew better. But I kept tabs. A grandmother always knows. She was living in a duplex in Ohio near her sister, working as a receptionist at a car dealership. It was honest work. It was real. And because it was real, I decided to intervene on my terms. I contacted Harrison. I instructed him to pay the tuition for Street Jude's directly to the school for Leo and Sophie. I also set up a direct payment plan for their orthodontics and their summer camps, but the checks never went to Jessica. They went to the institutions. Jessica tried to email me once, thanking me and asking if I could send a little extra for groceries and gas. I forwarded the email to Harrison with a note, do not reply. I was funding the future, not the parasite. Mark was released after 14 months for good behavior. He didn't come to see me. I assume he was too ashamed, or perhaps he was finally learning the lesson of self-reliance. I heard through the grapevine, Susan at the credit bureau still ran checks for me occasionally, that he was working construction in a neighboring county. Hard labor, pouring concrete. It was poetic in a way. The man who wouldn't pay for his own foundation was now building them for others. It wasn't until my 82nd birthday that we spoke again. I was sitting on a bench in the park, feeding the pigeons, wearing a coat that cost more than my first car. The autumn air was crisp. I saw a man walking up the path. He walked with a limp, a workplace injury, perhaps, and his face was weathered, lined by sun and exhaustion. He looked older than his 45 years. It was Mark. He didn't look like the soft corporate manager anymore. He looked like iron that had been beaten into shape. He stopped a few feet away. He was holding a small envelope. Happy birthday, Mom, he said. His voice was rougher, deeper. I looked at him. I didn't offer him a seat. Thank you, Mark. He shifted his weight, looking at his work boots. I know I'm not. I know I lost the right to be here, but I wanted to give you this. He held out the envelope. I took it. It was light. Inside was a cashier's check for $300. It's not much, he said, rushing the words, but it's the start. I'm on a payment plan for the restitution to the company, and I want to pay you back too. The $60,000. It might take me the rest of my life, but I'm going to pay it back. I looked at the check. $300. It was less than half of what I used to give him every week, but it represented more value than the $100,000 I had wasted. It represented sweat. It represented reality. I folded the check and put it in my pocket. Thank you, Mark, I said. I accept it. He looked up, surprised. You do? Yes, because you earned it. He nodded, his eyes filling with tears he refused to shed. I'm living in a studio apartment over a garage, he said. I make $22 an hour. I'm tired every day. My back hurts. And I'm actually happy, Mom. I mean, I'm not happy, but I sleep at night. I don't have to lie to anyone. I don't have to pretend I'm a big shot. I'm just Mark. I looked at my son. The boy I had raised was gone. The entitled monster he had become was gone. In their place was a man. A broken man, perhaps, but a real one. That is a good thing to be, Mark, I said softly. Just Mark. He hesitated. Can I sit for a minute? Just for a minute? I moved my purse from the empty space on the bench. Just for a minute, I said. He sat down. We didn't talk. We just watched the leaves fall. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just sat there in the quiet company of the mother he had almost destroyed, and the mother who had loved him enough to let him burn. After 10 minutes, he stood up. I have to get to work, he said. Second shift. I nodded. Work hard, Mark. I will, he said. He started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. Mom? Yes? That dinner for your 75th. I'm sorry I missed it. I heard the Dom Perignon is good there. I smiled. A small, genuine smile. It was excellent, Mark, and it tasted even better the next day. He smiled back a sad, crooked smile and walked away. I watched him go until he disappeared into the city crowd. I am 85 now. The trust for Leo and Sophie has matured nicely. It is worth over $4 million. They are in college now. Leo studying engineering, Sophie studying art history. They visit me often. They know the story. I told them everything when they turned 18. I showed them the ledgers. I showed them the emails. I wanted them to know that love is not an ATM. Love is a discipline. Mark still sends me a check every month. Sometimes it's $200, sometimes it's $400. I cash every single one. I put the money into a separate account. When I die, that account will go to him. It won't be a fortune, maybe $20,000, but it will be his money. Money he earned. Money he returned. I sit by the window of my apartment, watching the sun set over the skyline. My reflection in the glass is translucent, fading, but my eyes are clear. People often say that cutting off family is unnatural, that a mother's love should be unconditional. They are wrong. A mother's love is to prepare her child for the world. The world is indifferent. The world is hard. If I had continued to cushion Mark, the world would have crushed him when I was gone. By crushing him myself while I was still here to watch, I gave him the chance to rebuild his own spine. It was the hardest thing I ever did. It was the loneliest thing I ever did. But as I look at the stack of cashier's checks in my desk drawer, knowing that my son finally understands the weight of a dollar and the weight of a promise, I know I was right. My age meant nothing to them then, but my lesson means everything to them now, and that is a legacy worth more than any trust fund. I take a sip of my tea. It is Earl Grey, hot and bitter. I drink it to the dregs. The cup is empty, the debts are paid, and I am content.